good to see you today, and Happy New Year. Absolutely, it's good. It's good to see everybody in the new year. I love New Year. It really is one of my favorite times of the year. Just the newness, the freshness, hitting the reset button. I don't know. It just really is one of those times that I legitimately enjoy. But for a lot of people, it's lost its grandeur. You know, it's not as much as it used to be. For a lot of people, they've kind of given up on New Year. They've given up on this idea of starting fresh because it just doesn't seem like the season ever changes, and it doesn't really matter what's happening. It just kind of seems like things stay the same. And what I've also noticed is as people have given up on New Year, they still set resolutions, but they get lower each time. Like the expectation of those just continue to drop. Like for instance, maybe some of your resolutions look like this. Your first resolution, it naturally for many of us is going to be to get in shape, right? And so maybe you in 2013 you said, you know what, I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week. And that year passed, and 2014 came, and you said, well, this year I'm going to go to the gym 3 days a week. I'll go 3 days. And then this year, when you set your resolutions, you said that you would drive by the gym at least 1 day a week. That you were committed to at least driving by 1 day a week. That's what you're going to do. Maybe for you, it's not fitness. Maybe it's finances. A lot of people, we're going to get our money in order this time of year. And so for you said, I'm going to pay off my bank loan this year. By the end of the year, this bank loan is going to be paid off. And then the year passed, and next year you say, I'm going to pay off my bank loans by the end of the year. So you picked up some other ones along the way. And then this year, you've got a good plan. I will change my identity by the end of the year. I'm going to do that. I'm hoping it gets stolen so that somebody else is responsible for the loans that are now in my life. There's just nothing worse than the frustration of a new year coming and the old you remaining. It's just so frustrating to see that happen in your life. And it's just one of these things that a lot of people think, you know what? This is just my job. This is just the state of my marriage. This is just the way my health's going to be. Nothing's going to change about it. It doesn't matter what the calendar says and what change happens there. Nothing is changing in my life. And we just really get to this place to where we just see it as another day, another time, another season, and it's all just the same. And if we're not careful, that kind of thinking can quickly slip into your faith as well. I mean, maybe you're here today and you said, you know what, I believed for a promise for a long time, and time has punctured that, and my faith is just completely deflated. I just don't think that's going to happen. Maybe for you would say, I've seen some bright days in my life. I've seen some really great things. But if I was honest with you, I believe the past is brighter than the future. I just don't see how that this could get better than what it was, and so I'm just kind of have to live with these memories of what things were. If we're not careful, we can all actually believe, we can conceive that we have already seen God's best in our life. I mean, we really can believe that. We can think that the glory days, the good old years, that when I was able to do this, when we were in this time and place in our lives, that's when God did His best. And we can just think that we've already seen God's best in all of our lives. There's a passage in Mark, the Gospel of Mark, chapter 8, that I want to walk through. It's not too many verses today, that has a similar tone to it. And it speaks directly to this. In Mark 8:22, chapter 8, verse 22, it says this. It says, they came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a blind man. Now, we're not going to go any further because we need to unpack this idea that Jesus is coming into a city. Him and his disciples have just been witness, and he has performed one of the greatest miracles that is recorded in Scripture. He's fed thousands of people miraculously, and now he and his disciples are coming to the next village. And as they're coming into this village, like most villages Jesus encounters, they come, and there's a blind man there. And this is not unusual for people to bring people with lameness and all these kind of ideas to Jesus, that this is something that Jesus sees all the time. And so his friends bring him to Jesus. Now, he could have been born with blindness. We don't know. I mean, it's a good chance that maybe he was born. It's probably a greater chance during this time in history that he developed it, that it was something that actually developed in his life, that one day he was able to see, and then something happened, an accident, an illness, and it slowly pulled his vision away to, well, now he is blind. Now, we don't know much else about this man. We don't know his history. We don't know his family. We don't even know his name. We just know that he's blind. And to be blind in this culture is to be completely defeated. It's not today, it's not what today, it's not the society that we live in. It's not where we today have these state-sponsored assistance and modern medicine. It's to be blind then was to be completely defeated. There was no way, shape, or form that you were covered from something like this. And it really left every blind person with some major themes in their life. And the first one is that you were completely dependent. Completely dependent. There was none of this kind of, the society just didn't rally to you. They didn't believe you could do more. It was just, you are completely dependent. As a matter of fact, if you were a blind person, they would place you on the side of the road, leave you there, and you would have to beg to survive. There was no houses. There was nothing that people would want to take care of you. Often your family couldn't continue to provide for you because food and provision was just scarce during this time. And so you were just placed on the side of the road, and what will be, what will be. So they're completely dependent. If someone is not compassionate to this blind man, he's not going to have anything. And not only is he completely dependent, but he's deeply depressed. The psychological implications of losing your friends and your family and your self-worth and your position in life are not something minor. This is major. And then not only is he completely, he's just not completely dependent and deeply depressed, but he's also hopelessly disenfranchised. For him, this is not a season. This is his new reality. He is, for him, this is permanent. There's no cure, there's no hope, there's no help, there's no it's going to get better. He's blind. And so here he sits in this state. He's blind physically. I know people who are blind spiritually that equally are completely dependent on other people. Maybe for you, you're completely dependent on that person that you think you have to have. And no matter how they treat you, you're going to stay with them because they make you whole. Maybe for you, it's not a person, it's a substance or a habit. It's this thing that it just takes away the pressure for a moment, and that's good enough for you. Maybe for you, it's that you're just dependent on it, and no matter how damaging you know that is, you just can't picture life without it because you need it. Maybe you're a person who for you, it's just you're hopelessly, there's nothing there that you see. You're deeply depressed. Every positive that's brought to you is met with an excuse. You don't see your cup as half empty. You see it as bone dry. And if I was to guess, and if you were to be honest, this has affected your marriage. It's affected your job. It's also affected you. When you're alone, it feels very dark. But maybe that's not you. Maybe you're just hopelessly disenfranchised. You just don't believe that the season will change. Your struggle is your reality. That doesn't matter what the calendar says. It doesn't matter what changes happen. You see everybody else moving by, but you don't see a future. You think you've already seen God's best. You see, this blind man had to sit by the road day after day and consider and think to himself, I've seen God's best in my life. He had to think that I'm never going to see that person I love again. I'm never going to see that thing I enjoy. I've seen God's best in my life. And maybe that's you today. You just don't see any good that's going to come about in your future. A new year means nothing to you. You don't expect to see God on the horizon with anything good. As a matter of fact, you don't expect to see God at all. There's this blind man, and he's sitting there, and he's thinking this, and he's just processing it through. And what I would tell you and I would tell him is that that's where the enemy wants you, right? That's what he wants for your life. He wants you to believe that there's no good coming. He wants you to believe that. There's nothing more than the enemy would want for your life and his life than to be just accept it is what it is, to settle for what it is, to just come to terms that it is what it is, to just be complacent and just accept that this is your new reality. Because the enemy is very intentional in making sure that he drains your faith. And there's no better way for him to drain your faith than to never let you get started into a new year. And so what we find is that if he can get your faith dimming just a little bit, then he can get you to believe there's nothing good on the horizon. That God, and then all of a sudden you just stop seeing the horizon. You don't even believe there's anything good where you're presently at. And here's what I know about the enemy is that he is able to keep people in this position once he gets them there. Most people that deal with this kind of lack of faith, it's not something that's just one day and then the next day they're faith-filled. They are in this place for good unless something changes. Because what happens is that he is very good at keeping people in this state with two specific tools of his. The first one's complacency and the next one's condemnation. It's not that you don't believe God is great, you just don't think that he's great in your life. It's not that you don't think God's going to do good things, it's just you think he's not going to do them in your life or that you deserve them. And so he just keeps in this blind man. He says, you know what, there's no sense in even crying out. There's no sense in even worried about it. Your reality is what it is, and you can just settle into the lazy boy of complacency because nothing's going to change. Or on the other side, he tells him, you're blind, and there's a reason you're blind. It's because you did something wrong. It's because you did something, and this is God's judgment on your life. Either way, it keeps him chained to this for this moment. It keeps him there. It keeps him believing that there's nothing good coming for him. He's seen God's best already. Now, here's what I know, that these are dire circumstances for this man. These are dire circumstances. But he does have one thing going for him. Sometimes that happens to us in life, right? I mean, we're so focused on what's not right, we do forget there are some things that are right. He has one thing going for him. Scripture tells us he has a friend. A friend who comes into his life and has a little vision left. A friend who walks in and says, I can see Jesus coming. I need to help get you to Jesus. And if I could be that friend for you today, that's what I would want to do this new year. Is I would say that even though you don't see any good coming, I can see Jesus coming in your life. That he is literally on his way to bring about his best in your life. He's not overcome by your issues. He's not overwhelmed by your failures. He's more than able to rise to the challenges that are in your life. His reality is not your reality. So even though you can't see it yet and you think you've seen the best, it is not over. There is still good. As a matter of fact, I believe if you're still breathing today, his best is still in store for your life. I can see for you coming down the road the provision that you desperately need. I can see approaching the healing that you're desperate for. I can see the promotion that you think's not coming. It's on its way. I can see the deliverance you need. I can see the hope and the joy that you think's gone. Even though you think you've seen God's best, his best is still on the horizon for your life. Sometimes you just need a friend that can see a little further than you do. And that's what I see for this year. You have not seen God's best yet. He has it in store for you because God doesn't leave people on earth that he doesn't intend to still bring about his best in their life. He doesn't. So we go to this passage of scripture continues and it says that the friend brought him to Jesus and he says, and this blind man begged Jesus to touch him. Now this man knows something that we have to grasp, that there are moments and circumstances and seasons that will not be resolved in your life without a touch from Jesus. There are just some things that aren't going to get fixed unless he's the one that does it. Now, what's incredible about this is because our human nature is to fix things, right? I mean, I'll deal with it. I'll change my routines. I'll alter the state. I'll go to the gym more. I'll start dressing differently, thinking different. I'll do the fixing. That's what we believe, is that we can fix things. Well, they thought they could fix things during this time too. Modern medicine at this time, using the term loosely, believed that if you would spread rooster manure on your face, that your sight would be restored. That's what they say. So this guy's sitting here and he asked somebody for help and they said, well, here, let me put some rooster manure on your face and that's going to bring about, the healing you need. Now, as crazy as that sounds, we're not that far off. We're not. Now think about it. We make resolutions and we change jobs and change friends and we change houses and we change cars and we change hairstyles and we just think that something like that's going to make the difference that actually needs to happen in our life. Well, we think that that's what it's going to take. We think there's some small tweak that we can do that will make some giant difference. And here's what happens at the end. It remains the same. Nothing. It may be temporary. It may be for a moment. But that's the reason the most New Year's resolutions don't last past 8 days, is because they can't change some things in your life. Some things in your life, they can't be altered by that. They have to be altered by a touch from Jesus. You see, and here's why. Because in life, you can either focus on doing something different or being someone different. You see, doing something different is me trying to fix myself. Being someone different is the result of Jesus touching my life. It's the difference between change from the inside out versus the outside in. And so this man realizes this, and so do you, and so do I. There's never been a significant change in my life that's not come at the hands of Jesus. As much as I've ever tried, as much as I've ever put effort into it and planned and rehearsed and got this new app, nothing has ever changed in my life without a significant touch from Jesus. Now, for this man, the next couple verses are profound if you want to see God's best in your life. They're profound. And so I would just tell you that if you want to have eyes full of faith this year, and you want to have a heart full of faith, and you want to have keen ability to see spiritually, then you should do the things that Jesus instructs this man to do. And so I would take a couple notes. I would slap them on my fridge. I would put them where I could see them often, because this is the way that Jesus ensured this man saw his best in his future and not behind him. The first one is that you have to focus on what God says. You have to focus on what God says. See, here sits this blind man, and his friend tries to get him up, and I'm imagining that was not successful to begin with. You know, his friend said, Jesus is coming. You got to get up. It ain't going to make no difference. I'm blind. I've got no faith for this to make any difference. It's not like he just jumped up and said, oh, this is going to work out great. Yeah, he's in a place of disenfranchisement. But all of a sudden, even though he can't see, he hears something. And it's Jesus and his disciples walking into this village. And this conversation they're having actually happens a few verses earlier. And I want to show it to you. The disciples are having a discussion about somebody forgot to bring lunch, and they're worried. They're worried because they didn't bring food. And I know it's hard to grasp, but in this time in history, the food is not, we're just not running into 7-Eleven. They're under enslavement and in poverty from the Roman government. This is something that's a real concern, and they're having this conversation. And so let's pick it up in verse 17. It says, aware of their discussion, Jesus asked them, why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes, but fail to see? Ears, but fail to hear? And don't you remember when I broke, just a few moments ago, 5 loaves for 5,000? How many baskets full did we pick up? And they sheepishly said, 12. And then he replied and he said, and when I broke 7 loaves for 4,000, how many baskets did I pick up? And they said, 7. And he said to them, do you still not understand? Now, here's what's happening is that they have witnessed God do an incredible work and immediately turned around and wondered if God can do an incredible work. That's exactly what they've had. They saw with their eyes one thing, but forgot to perceive it with their spirit in another way. And so what they're sitting here doing is they don't see Jesus' ability, they see their disability. And Jesus is frustrated with this. He's saying, guys, literally a few moments ago, we just got done serving the greatest catering event that's ever been done in history, and it was all done from my hands, and you're worried about somebody forgot lunch. That's what you're worried about. And so Jesus, but you got to go from that conversation to the blind man. Now, I think for him, a spiritual light bulb went off at this moment. I really think it did, because he can't see, but he could hear. And for the first time in his life, he probably had the idea that it doesn't matter what things look like. It only matters what Jesus says they are. He all of a sudden gets that this thing that has been so bad in my life really doesn't have anything to do with what's going to change my life as long as I can hear Jesus. Because when you're blind, you can't see. But the Bible doesn't say that you have to be able to see things that come about change in your life. It says you have to be able to hear things for change to come about in your life. Romans 10:17 says that you are able to have faith because you hear the Word of God, not because you see the Word of God. And so all of a sudden, this blind man realizes that he's not the one with the disability because he's hearing what Jesus is saying. He's the one that finally grasps that it's not what you see, it's just what you hear. You see, you don't have to be able to see your circumstances change for them to be able to change. You just have to be able to hear what God says about your circumstances for them to be able to change. You don't have to see that reality take place. You don't have to look at your circumstances or your situation because it really doesn't matter. What matters is what has God said about it. That's all that matters. The reality is not what you see, it's what He says. And so in this moment, you can feel faith rising in him because for once, everybody's as blind as he is because it doesn't matter what you see. It only matters what you hear. You see, igniting God's vision for your life is going to start with believing what Jesus says, not what you see. And if you could just, faith that you need isn't going to be found in what your situation looks like. You know, I know that that's what we look at things. We look at, well, you just got to know my reality. You got to see this. And when I pray with people, if you just understood, it doesn't matter what it looks like. It matters what God said about it. This is the crazy thing about this is this man took Jesus simply at his word. He simply said, well, if he can feed that many, then what is a blind man to him? And he gets up when everybody else is fussing about what they don't have. All of a sudden, he gets up with faith because of what he can have based on what he heard Jesus say. Now, here's the core of the problem for our lives is that we don't know what God said about the situations that we have in our lives. We know what everybody else has said. We know what we think about it, but we don't know what God said about it. We simply don't know what He's had to pronounce over this thing in our lives. If you want change this year, if you want something different, the single greatest thing you could do is make sure that you spend a moment daily in God's Word and hear what He has to say about your life. There is nothing greater that you can do. I don't care if you get it from an app. I don't care if you get it from an email. I don't care if you get it by turning a page. It doesn't matter that you get it. It matters that it gets you. All that matters is that you hear what God has to say about your year and you focus on what He has to say so that, and this is what I'm telling myself this year, and this is what you need to tell you. I don't want a year founded on what I perceive. I want a year founded on what God pronounces. I don't want a year based on what I see happening. I want a year based on what God says is happening. There's two different realities. And so all of a sudden he hears Jesus' voice and he says, you know what? I don't want to perceive anything anymore. I want to hear what He pronounces. And he gets up and it continues to the second point. You got to focus on what He says, but then you got to follow His steps. You got to follow His steps. Look in verse 23, the next verse, it says, He took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. Now, when I meet people who are defeated in their life, especially in their faith, they always fall into one or two categories. They either don't know what God has said, which we just talked about, or they know, but they don't really know. Okay? What that means is that they know what God said. They've heard the message, they've read some scriptures, they've strolled through the Bible bookstore. They can give you a little bit of it, but it has not affected the way they walk, the way they talk, the way they act. It has not affected how they believe. They just know it, but they don't really know it. You get what I'm saying? They don't grasp it. They don't fully. And here's why. Because they're not following what it says. They think that it's just something that's just out there kind of in suggestion. When God says something, it's a command. It's not a suggestion. This is not a book that He's given us that's just full of all these ideas and you should try a couple to see if they'll work out for you. This is the best way to live your life. This is how you have the best way that you see your life come about. And so this is all of a sudden we start seeing that not knowing God's Word is debilitating to your life, but equally debilitating is not doing what God said. It's not just about knowing what He said, it's about doing what He said as well. I know all kinds of people in their lives who just come to this conclusion that, I can't have God's best in my life. Well, you're not going to experience freedom without walking in forgiveness. You're not going to experience blessing without walking in priority in your finances. You're not going to sense God guiding your steps if you don't take time to shine the light of His Word on your steps. There is this really basic idea that you can't just hear what He says, you also have to follow what He says. And this is what's happening for this blind man in this moment. So for us, if there's a big difference in what God said and the result that you're seeing in your life, it's because you're not taking steps to see that come about. It's like God's telling you to do something and you're just taking it as a suggestion. But when this man takes the steps, that's when the power of Jesus is released. Jesus' power, the potential of His power is not realized in your life until you take steps on what He said. I mean, think about it. When Peter's rocking in the boat and Jesus says, step out, there was not a miracle till what? There was a step. There was a word that went out, but there wasn't a step. And that's when the miracle takes place. So he's following it, and it gets a little weird. Look at this. It continues, and it says, speaking of Jesus, when He had spit on the man's eyes and put His hands on him, Jesus asked, do you see anything? He looked up and said, I see people walking around like trees. And once more, Jesus put His hands on his eyes, and his eyes were opened, and his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Now, God's request for action is always about a test of faith. It's always about a test of faith. It would have done no good for Jesus to say, I'm going to heal you, and then they just kind of sat and, one of them sat and looked at each other. The other one would have assumed He'd been there, right? There would just been no good out of that. Jesus says, I want you to do a couple things to test your faith. Because Jesus is fine with healing his physical eyes, but Jesus is more interested in healing his spiritual eyes. And so here are the two main questions that are always on the test of faith. These are the two main questions. The first one is, will you take steps without the details? Will you take steps without the details? Now, Jesus did not say, now, thank you for coming here today to my office. I'm getting ready to put together a mixture. I will apply it to your eyes. And then after that, you will feel this burning sensation, and then you're going to be able to see clearly. That's not what Jesus said. Do you want to know what this man heard Jesus say? Close your eyes. I'm going to tell you what He said. Close your eyes. Be blind for a minute. This is the only detail this man got. That's the only detail he got. You don't think he started wondering, now what is going on? The only detail this man gets is hearing Jesus spit. If you're going to see God do great things in your life, if you're going to see His best in your life, you're going to have to get used to following a God who doesn't do details. Now, it's not the fact that He doesn't know the details. He just doesn't share them. He knows every detail of your life. He knows every contingency plan for every situation you're ever going to face. He's just not into sending memos. And so you're not going to get all these details. You're going to have to remember that sometimes in life, you're just going to have to trust He will do it without knowing how He will do it. And so for this man, he's got to stand there and take it, because I'm sure there's a moment where he's like, you've brought me out here for no reason. But he decides to stick in because he's got faith, and faith says no matter what the details, I'm going to stick in here. But the second question is, will you take steps that make no sense? Will you take steps that make no sense? Now, here's what is happening. You don't think that in his mind, when Jesus started spitting on his face, he thought, this is the rooster manure all over again. This is the rooster. I mean, we've tried this. It doesn't work. It's not going to make it. This doesn't make any sense. Why are you wasting my time? For you, maybe the only word you have gotten from God about your marriage is stay, and that doesn't make sense, but you got to stay. Maybe for you, the only word that God's given you about your future is that you have to trust. And I know that doesn't make sense with what things look like right now, but trust. I know for some of you, when you say, God, what are you going to do in this situation? He simply has said, I will provide. That has to be enough for you, no matter how difficult it may look, no matter how much sense it doesn't make. You have to stay in there, because God is not one that's going to share with you how He's going to do everything. It's just the guarantee that He will do it. So you've got to just settle on that and learn to trust that He's going to do it, no matter that you don't know how. And so this is one of the most interesting healings that Jesus ever conducts. He takes this man and he spits on his face and then he lays hands on him and there seems to be like the healing didn't take, right? Because the man goes, well, I can see trees, but I can't, they're like men. And a lot of people wonder, did Jesus met his match? What was taking place here? You have to look at it in the context of what we're talking about. Jesus was more than happy to heal this man's physical eyes, but he was more concerned with his faith. He had disciples who could see but didn't perceive, right? So he wants to make sure he's not leaving this guy without being able to see spiritually. So do you know what he's saying when there's kind of this half moment, this moment where he's not fully healed? I fully believe Jesus steps back and wants to see if the man's willing to settle for less. I think he stands back and goes, well, let's see if he'll settle for just being able to see some or if he believes that I still have my best to give him. I think he just steps back and he says, I want to see if that culture of settlement is still on his life. Because Jesus is for fixing eyes, but before that, he's for fixing faith. And so he steps back and this man says, this isn't done. I need one more touch. I've got to have you touch me again because this is not your best. That's when Jesus knew all of a sudden that this man's heart was beginning to change, that he wasn't going to be the same person. I mean, you can be, did you know that you can have the ailment gone and still be the same person? You can have the thing wrong, that you think's wrong in your life be taken out and you're still the same person. Because those are two different things. And so Jesus makes sure about this. And then he says, you got to focus on what I say. You got to follow my steps. And this is the last one, and this is the most difficult one. This is a lot easier than this one's a lot harder than letting me spit in your face. You have to forget the familiar. See, verse 26 says, Jesus sent him home saying, don't even go into that village. What do you mean? The meaning that Jesus took him by the hand, walked him out of Bethsaida, and said, you got a new home and it's not in that place that you just came from. Now that's tough. And for a minute, you're just trying to figure out, Jesus, what are you doing here? The man can see now. Shouldn't he go home? Shouldn't he go back to his life? Shouldn't he have what he had? Jesus, this miracle's taking place. Why don't you want him to go back? And here's the reason. Because your familiar is not always fruitful. The familiar of your life is often not fruitful. It's not something that's going to bring about God's best for your life because there's no way that you can hear what God says, follow his steps, and end up back at your old life. It just doesn't work like that. When you encounter Jesus, you end up someplace different. And so he tells this man, he says, I don't want you to go back there. I don't want you to even do that because a step toward your destiny is a step away from your security. See, to a blind person, familiarity was everything. It's everything. He knew what corner was what. He knew what step was where. He knew what smells were where. He knew. And so he's telling this guy, you can't go back there. You have to go to a place you've never been. And here's why. That village had a culture of people who could see but were blind in their faith. You remember Matthew 11. Jesus curses this village. Now, this village had seen they call this village the village of the apostles. 3 different apostles were born in this village. Jesus did some of his greatest miracles in this village. And in Matthew chapter 11, here's what Jesus does. He says, woe to you, Chorazin, woe to you, Bethsaida, which is where he's at. For if the miracles that were performed in you had been performed anywhere else, they would have repented a long time ago, but you have hard hearts. He says you can't go back to where you were because that culture will undo what I've done in your life. Do you grasp that? That God can do a work in your life. You can walk in here around in a victory, believing it's all taken care of, and you walk back to that same group of people that don't have the victory you have, and they pull it out of you. You can go back into situations that literally undo what God's done in your life. And he says, do not go back there. You have to put the familiar in the rearview mirror. You have to take it and put it in a different place because if you go back there, it's just going to undo what I've already done. See, you cannot follow what God says, and you cannot follow his steps and just end up back where you've always ended up. It's about going to a new life. It's about a new future with him. In this moment, I love this. In this moment, Jesus is less concerned about showing him his new life and making sure he undid his old life. I know a lot of people that want a new life, and they're still trying to live the old one. And so part of running for God's plan for your life is not just running to God, it's running away from and making sure you can never run back to what's familiar in your life. You got to burn some bridges. I know we talk about we don't want to burn bridges. This is one you need to burn for your life. You just need to say, I don't need to go back there. I don't want the familiar. And this isn't just about sin, okay? Because I know some of us are sitting there thinking this is about relationships and places we hang out and people. That's not the case. Because there's a lot of places in Jesus' ministry where he sent a person who experienced a miracle back into the place they came from so that they would spread the gospel. So this is not one of those you get Jesus and you quit being friends with people. That's not how it works. This is about settling in faith. This is about people who come to church every week and they just aren't going any deeper with God. The familiar is I do my Sunday, I do a little bit of quiet time, I do a few prayers, and all of a sudden it's done. That's the familiar that's happening here. Jesus is not saying don't go evangelize. He's saying don't go back to believing the same way that you believed. Because for us, we all have this, your familiar changes you. It chains you to the ordinary in your life. Each one of us have a Bethsaida in our lives. For some of us, it's a job you won't give up to go after God's calling for your life. For some of us, it's hurt and resentment that we just will not forgive no matter how many sermons we hear about it, no matter how many people challenge us to. That's our familiar. We're mad. And then for some of us, it's just the fact that we just live too comfortably. We just don't ever take any risk. We don't ever step out on anything God says. It's just a comfortable, nice little cushion life that God doesn't have to be involved in because we haven't needed him in a long time. That's what he's talking. You see, the cost of following Jesus is great, but the cost of not following him is much greater. When you pursue Jesus, you're going to give up some things in life, but those things will not outweigh the regret you have if you don't follow Jesus. And so he's saying, do not go back to the familiar. Do not go back to it. And I would imagine at this point, for all of us, you're sitting there going, all right, I got it, Pastor Joe. I'm going to focus on God's word. Got it. Daily reading plan done. I'm going to follow his steps. I'm going to start giving. I'm going to start serving. I'm not going to cuss anymore. I'm going to do it right. I'm going to follow the steps. Leave the familiar? Yeah. Come on. I mean, what does that mean exactly? I mean, leave what? What? I don't know if I can leave the familiar. I kind of like the way things are. You sure I got to do that? Yep. You know why? Because people who don't leave the familiar never see God's best in their life. They just don't. But there's something left in this text. Pastor Josh, will you come here and help me? You guys give Pastor Josh a hand. Doesn't he look good today? Now, there's something left in this text because, as I mentioned, you're going to be the blind guy, okay? So you're blind. All right. I'm going to be Jesus because it's my illustration. And here's what I know. Take me by the hand. He leads this blind, just walk with me. He leads this guy out. And this guy's nothing outside of his familiar. Right? Because he knows where the carts are. He knows where that donkey lays what it lays. He knows where the bread comes from. He knows at what time, who walks by that gives him what. The familiar is everything. And that's true of still today. I have a friend who has a blind young lady in his church, and her parents were going to build this new house, and they stopped building a new house because she was so familiar with the current house that they didn't want her to mess up. Familiarity for you is big, but for him, it's everything. It's everything. So he's sitting there, and he all of a sudden can see, and Jesus leads him out, and Jesus performs the two prayers, and all of a sudden he can see. And then he thinks to himself, I'm all for taking this healing, but you don't want me to go back. That's all I know. Just because he can see here doesn't mean that it's fully done here. And he says, that's all I know. That's all I know. That's my familiar. That's the relationship. That's what I have to have. That's the way we've always done it. I don't know, Jesus. And you would have to assume that in his mind he thought, I'm just going to take my chances. I'm just going to take this healing and I'm going to go back and I'll just take my chances. I'm going to disobey what God said. You would imagine that is. Because the ability to leave the familiar for him is too great. He cannot do it except for he has an epiphany. There's a moment of realization for him that he can do anything that Christ instructs him to do, not because of his new eyes, because he's holding the hand of God. See, the Bible doesn't tell us that Jesus ever dropped his hand. He let him out, he healed him up, and then he said, now you've got a new future. Don't be going back to the familiar. Let's go. It doesn't say you ever let go of him. Your new year is not on your own. Christ is so compassionate that he knows that change is difficult. He knows leaving the familiar is sometimes overwhelming. You're not doing it on his directive. You're doing it holding his hand. He literally is walking with you into what he's asking you to do. You have such a good Savior that he is so good to you, so for you, that he doesn't send you into a new life. He escorts you into a new life. Your new year will not know a day that you're not holding his hand. Your new year won't know a day that you're not being held by him for everything. Do you know how many times it says do not fear in the Bible? 365 times. That's one for every day. Every day he grabs a man and said, don't worry about leaving the familiar. You're going to be fine. I'm with you. I'm with you. Don't worry about it. Just because you got eyes doesn't mean it's any less scary. As long as you got this is all you got to worry about. All right? Do you see that that's what God's doing in your life? He's not asking you to do something in your own strength. He's taking you by the hand and saying, if you'll listen to me, if you'll focus on what I'm saying, if you'll follow the steps that I've set out, if you will forget the familiar, I will do something so great, so awe-inspiring, so magnificent that you will not be able to conceive it. It will be so great, you better be holding my hand because it'll knock you on the floor. That's how much good God has planned for your life this year. He believes his best is still coming about, and he wants to be there to see it with you. I want you to stand to your feet this morning. When I was praying about this message, I sensed something very specific. For people here who are of age, the pillars of our church, fathers of our church, mothers of our church, people who've been in this a while, you will see God's best in your life. You have not already seen what God has best for you. It's not in what he's done. If you're here, he's still got something he wants to do through you and with you. Sometimes I think we just think that we'd rather run the B-roll of what he did, and that's the greatest thing he's ever going to do. If you're still breathing, he still has good plan for your life. Now, here's what it requires, though. You don't get his good in your way. And this is for all of us. We don't get to keep doing what we want to do and the way we want to do it. We have to want him more, hear his voice clearer than ever before, follow his steps more than ever before, and we're going to have to leave the familiar. But if we do that, you'll see God's best in your life. You have not seen his best. I want you to bow your heads. If you're here today and you say, you know what, I've not seen much of God at all in my life. This is new to me. Or maybe you say, I've not really ever made a commitment to allowing Jesus to lead anything in my life. I want to make sure that you start off your new year the best way possible, which is not doing something different, but being someone different. When you follow Christ, it transforms your life. He does things that you could never do. He changes things about you that you could never change. The things that you have tried to fix about yourself with resolutions and schedules and routines, he can fix them in a moment by submitting your life to him. So if that's you today and you want to accept Christ as now the leader of your life, if you want to follow him, you want to hear his voice, you want to follow him, you say, God, I've tried it my way, I want to live your way. I want you to stick your hand up. I want to pray for you. I want to stick your hand up. You sticking your hand up is a action. It's you saying, God, I'm taking a step. I'm showing that I want you. I see hands going up all over the place. I see them in the balcony. I see them in the balcony. Leave it up. Leave it up. I see it in the back. See it on the floor. I want to live for Christ. I want to hear his voice, and I want to follow his steps. Father, I pray right now in the name of Jesus that you would touch every person here. Not in a way that we could touch them, not in a way we could love them, not in a way that we could care for them, but God, in a way that transforms their life. They are not joining a church. They're not making a pledge. They are making you the Lord, director, guider, leader of their life. Lord, I pray that you would transform things they cannot change about themselves, things they've struggled with for years, things they wish they could give up, things that they don't fully grasp and they think they're at a disadvantage. I pray right now you transform it in the name of Jesus. I pray that habits would fall off. I pray that mindsets would fall off. The familiar would not be difficult to leave, that you would literally take them by the hand right now and lead them into your most glorious, abundant life for them. I pray all of this in the name of Jesus. If you made that commitment, the next step you need to take is you need to fill out a prayer card. The prayer card it was brought to your attention earlier. It's the seat in front of you. You need to mark on there. And here's why, is because when you're starting a new year, one time of raising your hand, that's not going to do it. God is going to transform your life, but now you need to be able to hear what he says. You need to know how to take steps in where he's leading, and we're going to help you do that. That's what we're here for, is to help you become more like Christ. It's our mandate as a church to make disciples, and we want to help you do that. So take that card, fill it out, drop it in the seat. Some ushers are going to pick that up, and we're going to help give you your next step, okay? Now for everybody else, if you want God's best in your life, not just want it, but you believe that his best is ahead of you and not behind you, and that you're going to commit to hearing what he has to say, to following his steps this year more than you've ever have before, taking steps that you may have struggled with in the past, and you're saying, God, I want to leave the familiar. I don't want life how it's always been. Even if it's been good, I want your best. I'm going to pray, and I'm going to pray that the Lord literally touches your heart in a way that you know he's with you. That you know he's got you by the hand. That there's no more fear, no more worry, no more. That you literally gain victory through surrendering to him. So if you want that, I want you to raise your hands all over this place, and I want to pray with you right now. Father, they want their best year ever. Not in the way that we define years, in the way that you define years, God. The way that you give your best, not our best. They're not asking for their best, they're asking for your best. So I pray, Father, that you would do a mighty work in every one of their lives. I pray that, Father, they would hear your voice clearer than ever before, that your scriptures would literally leap off the page and touch their hearts. I pray, Father, that Holy Spirit, you would guide them to walk out every step that they read, every step that they walk in. For some of them, it's going to be to start fasting and seeking you. For some of them, it's beginning a prayer life. For some, it's giving and trusting God with their finances. For some, it's serving. God, no matter what it is, I pray that they would follow your steps and that they would see miracles because of it. And Father, I pray right now that literally they would sense your touch. They would sense your presence, that they would know that you are with them. God, this is not a directive that you've pointed them to. This is an escort that you've grabbed hold of their hand and carried them to. Lord, I believe that if we are founded on what you say this year, we will see the greatest year that you have ever designed for our life. And if you believe that and want that for your life, I want you to say amen. Amen. Bless God right now. Tell him how good he is. God, you're so wonderful, so magnificent. God, we bless you. We honor you with our lives. If I was you, this is just me, if I was you, I would take 5 minutes and I would worship God to finish off this service. This is your first service of a new year. If I was you, I'd take 5 minutes and I would start my year with making sure God is in top priority, in top place in my life through worship.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope that this message was an encouragement to you to live a life fully devoted to God. For more information about Twin Rivers Worship Center, or if you would like to partner with this church's ministry in St. Louis, Missouri and around the world by giving, visit us at our website at TRWC.com. We would love for you to join us in a worship service at one of our 2 locations sometime. Have a great day and be blessed.